Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Andy Sawyer and I am the Head of Global Operations at Winterhawk. I'll be co-hosting today's webinar with my colleague who's also on the call, Bill Oliver. We'll hear from Bill very soon, and he'll be driving the main content of today's session. Now, before I hand over to Bill, I'd like to just briefly discuss a short company overview and highlight some of our key focus areas. At Winterhawk, we specialize in services relating to SAP GRC, security, and vulnerability management, with a high focus on items such as regulatory governance and cybersecurity. We're a global organization, and we've got resources located across EMEA and also in North America. And the types of services that we provide cover everything from initial application assessment, solution deployment, managed or on-demand support services, and pretty much anything in between. Now, in today's webinar, we're going to focus specifically on SAP system vulnerability, and we'll discuss kind of how to gain insights into system exposure and look at ways to help remediate against risks such as data loss. Now, I'm going to hand over to Bill, who's going to take us through the next session. So, Bill, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. So thank you everybody for coming. A little fast there. So thank you everybody. Good afternoon. So look, SAP's been around since the early 70s, 400,000 clients plus over 500,000 clients, and SAP's getting hacked. It's been getting hacked for a while. The first one was in 2012. And it was really the Greek Ministry of Finance, and it was done by a group called Anonymous, and they had a 0-day, what we call a 0-day or a non-known bug exposed, and they were able to get in and do a few things. And what I tell people, I get a lot of questions on people ask me, well, do they really break into SAP? Don't they break into like emails, like the if you're familiar with the Sony Pictures hack, or Yahoo, where they're breaking into files and things of that nature, including email? I'm like, no, they break into SAP. Again, if you to look at, I've always seen statistics and studies that kind of share that say basically, hey, more than half the pharmaceutical run on it. You've got, you've got all these other industries running on it: pharmaceutical, finance, governments, power utilities. So it's a target for bad actors all the way around. And yes, this is real. And what you see here is a couple, I'd recommend you go Google them, take a look at them, but these are real hacks and real issues that have come across in SAP. And as we know, a lot of studies have come out, and one of them here was done just recently. And what we're seeing is a couple of fascinating things. And again, a lot of research on this topic is they're saying 65% of the surveys, they said SAP has been breached at least in the past 24 months. That's 65%. And again, it's where all the business and commerce is done in the globe. So people are definitely looking to breach these. And again, the other one, the last one, was it took an average of 77 days to contain the incident. And there's been studies that say it's been around, they could have been in the system for over 200 days and stuff. So again, really, really key. And again, I'm trying to set the stage that people are seeing this, they are doing this. SAP is a target. It's where all the commerce is. It's where a lot, the B2B is. So it's very, very huge. And definitely from the research, and people are spending more and more time on this.
So, well, it's actually going to sound a little bit obvious, but knowing and truly understanding what your risks are is paramount to building an effective response. And some of those key risks around cybersecurity and system vulnerability are centered around the possibility of external fraud and also data losses. We've seen so many examples recently of organizations who have been breached, and often one of the biggest impacts ends up being the business downtime suffered, both during and after the event has actually occurred. The time to get back to normal operations is often significant, and some organizations take months, if not longer, to be truly fully operational again. But with all that said, with the right business focus, the right visibility into what the risk is, you can take control of these challenges and help mount an effective defense. So in the next section, we're going to take a closer look at some of the solutions which support organizations, both from an application monitoring perspective and also those that help to mitigate the risk itself. Now, first things first, it's worth highlighting that this is not an exhaustive list of all things GRC, and certainly doesn't cover all of the SAP GRC applications either. But what we're going to do is home in on a few key solutions that provide important coverage across 4 business challenges. And to kick us off, we'll talk about access governance, which is a topic which should be high on the agenda of any organization of any size. It's certainly a challenge that most businesses are familiar with or have, at least encountered at some point. However, sadly, we do see time and time again, organizations who don't have an effective or clear strategy in place for dealing with the challenges, or they just lack the means to effectively manage the risk. And this can often occur due to out-of-date processes or limited control on authorization and user access rights. But with solutions like SAP Access Control, an organization can focus in and detect those internal exposures, which gain insight into segregation of duties, assignment of sensitive access, but also have a much greater control over who receives privileged access within the organization. To give another example, solutions such as UI masking, UI logging, they add an extra layer of visibility and protection on top of the standard authorization model. And in our experience, regular access assignment and standard user restriction can be very limiting. So that additional layer can really help aid an organization who's struggling to contain or mitigate against those internal data visibility issues. Next up, we've got identity and digital transformation. And for us, this is an area where an organization can really drive significant reduction in their manual activities. We're looking to fully automate, IT and business processes. For example, the management of a user's identity is often an area where we see this being driven by manual provisioning, heavy reliance on manual service requests, reaching multiple different streams and departments within the organization to provide that that provisioning. But with solutions like SAP Identity Manager or Hitachi ID, an organization can effectively deliver their join and move or leaver processes via a single access request. And with that request, it can actually originate from the HR system. It can be from a single form within the service management platform, or it could actually be directly via the identity solution as well. So moving away from a manual provisioning process to a more automated model, it'll have a hugely positive impact on items such as your wait times for how long it takes to get new starters in the system. Also on the other side as well, on the deprovisioning of users who have left the organization, so they're not hanging around in your SAP systems for too long after they've already left the organization. And then finally, it kind of frees up those resources that have been providing that manual processing to add more value to the team with more time available. Another challenge faced by organizations in relation to this is knowing what data they have in their systems and where that data is actually being stored. So for organizations that are maybe going through a transformation, or they're looking at ways to improve their data privacy policies, something like Big ID can provide that visibility, and will also support the cataloging of data to help reduce the impact of it either being compromised or just lost. Moving on, we have solutions relating to business assurance. So solutions such as SAP Process Control, SAP Risk Management, well, they provide a platform to effectively document, manage, and assess business risk and control frameworks. So in short, these solutions really provide structure to compliance activities, and that can be relevant for all areas of the business, whether that spotlight is on IT or finance, or whether there's a particular regulatory requirement they also need to adhere by. And then finally, we have cyber and fraud management. And two key solutions in this group are SAP Business Integrity Screening and SAP Enterprise Threat Detection, which will help an organization track external threats to the landscape, as well as monitoring the systems internally for any fraudulent activity or potential misuse. Now, both these solutions are extremely powerful, and certainly with the likes of Business Integrity Screening, it's capable of blocking activity from taking place within SAP. An example of this, is there was an irregularity found, during the creation of a purchase order or the modification of customer or vendor master data. Now, ETD, on the other hand, that kind of focuses on real-time event detection, so that any potential application breach across the SAP landscape can be flagged immediately for investigation and for follow-up with the relevant owners and controllers. However, with all that being said, and the power of those solutions, our initial recommendation is that in order to truly gain control over your SAP environments, you really need to first understand where your vulnerabilities already reside. So if we take the analogy of SAP, our SAP systems are a house, you always want to lock your front door before you set your alarms, start checking your security camera feed. And that's where a vulnerability assessment can provide that insight, whether it's something related to missing security patches, misconfiguration, unstable connections, within SAP. Understanding where you have these potential openings is vital to building, the effective defense, that we're talking about.
Thank you, Andy. So I've used this slide before, and I've used it in front of some CISOs, and I find it very helpful to kind of bucket and identify your risks. And really, a couple of the key ones here I find is really your first one, GDPR. US, non-US, all you guys in Europe, you are required to follow this. This really is one of those risks where cybersecurity and really looking at the product suites and some of the processes Andy just talked about is critical. Other one here I want to highlight is the increase in cybercrime. It is just going through the roof, especially with everybody home. People are kind of finding mischievous things to do. Threat actors just absolutely love this time. They are not taking a break. They're going at everything and anything. And really the key there is, I tell my customers, it's like you don't want to be the one that gets written up in the Financial Times to say, oh, guess what, we got broken into. Your reputation alone, people get scared, they get skittish. Here in the United States, we had the Sony pictures, that complete debacle. I urge you to Google it if you want to see how that cyber crime went down and the bad actors there. But again, I find these buckets, really helpful. Obviously, cloud hosting, everybody is going to the cloud, and where sometimes the cloud helps, I'll say, with some of the penetration and some of the vulnerabilities, a lot of times it doesn't. And again, everybody's on the web. We're all using B2B and all that stuff. And what I'm finding also is auditors. They're finding more ways. They are looking at this more and more and more, and they are starting to look at it as part of your financial audits in terms of operational damage and operational risk. So definitely something you want to think about and continue on with. As I go to the screen. And that gets me to really looking at risk assessments and cyber vulnerability assessments. And I tell you a story here. I had a CISO with a food and beverage company a couple of years ago saying, Bill, I want to do a penetration test. I want you to come in and do a penetration test. I want you to look at the penetration. I want you to break into my system. And I said, Christine, let me ask you a couple questions. I'm like, one, have you ever done any vulnerability assessments? Do you know where your holes are and aren't? Have you done a quick audit of that? No, I just want you to break in. Like, When was the last time you did a patch? When was the last time you ran your security patches? Oh, I'm not sure, but I'm betting it was the same time we did our yearly patch update. So that was about a year ago. I said, look, let's save yourself some time. I'm going to get in. It's easy. It's not a hard thing. If you answer those two questions like that, you're getting in. So really what I urge and what I really talk to people about is really looking at a vulnerability assessment. You want to start, you've heard the term hardening your network, hardening your systems. Well, I want you to talk about hardening SAP. And with this, I really want to talk about, it's not that SAP authorization concept layer. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about profile generator. I'm not talking about your SU24. I'm not talking about who has access to what tables with SE16, nor am I talking about your outer end, your DMZ, your firewalls, your networks. I'm really not talking about that outer end. What I'm really talking about here is looking at what I would call your SAP infrastructure, and really that layer in between those two. And it's really key. And what we have is we perform these vulnerability assessments all the time, and we've got about 1,600 checks we perform, and we've done some heat maps. We look at some threat assessments. We look at really how a hacker can get into your system, how they're going to get into your system. And obviously we come up with some really good recommendations and kind of look at that and with that reporting. Coming back here, some of the common issues we see when we do these vulnerability assessments is really, there's a list out here, but a couple I run into all the time is more people than less can be in SAP and can run your OS command structure. Really, OS command running, break a whole bunch of things there. Not really good. Definitely see some misconfiguration around some of the firewalls that connect to SAP, your SAP router, your gateway protection. We'll talk a little bit of that one in a minute with SAP Gateway. And the other big one I see is directory traversing. People are locked in. Hey, we got to put out a file. We got to drop a file in, or we got to pick up a file. Well, you lock them into that one directory, and then they can go up the chain and then back down the chain on another directory, cause all sorts of havoc. It's kind of those are the three. At any given time, hackers are looking at, threat actors and, all those bad people are looking at. We also find some passwords. I won't lie to you. We've broken in with a couple of default passwords for Solman and all that good stuff. But again, those are the key. And a lot of things really culminate around a good percentage of the time, you just weren't patching, you weren't putting in your SAP security notes in a timely manner. That's the majority of it. But again, there's a lot of configuration items there as well. What does the report look like? So quick example here, you'll see we're going to have a bunch of them. I'm going to highlight the first one here. I'm going to talk a little about the 10K Blaze with the ACL restriction. This got some notoriety about a year ago, and it's still there. It's still there. People are missing it, and there is an OSS note. There's a note for this that can fix this. Then there's a manual part of it and a coding part of it. But by all means, so we kind of come out and we say, hey, look, these are your scenarios, and then going back before, it kind of shows that. Coming into the next one, and you'll see here, we've got a clear reference. We talk about the message server ACL file is restricted. There's an issue there. We check that. It's the ABAP Java layer. Again, that infrastructure level, not that PFCG structure I'm not looking at. And you'll see it has a common name that goes across, so you'll see it will reference it across the line. Also, you look here, plain English. That's one of the things we see. Like, I could show you some of the first reports I've done years ago, and it's all encrypted, and it's all language and text and all that stuff. And what I found was, while I can get with the basis team and the security team, they would understand me, but really had that struggle making sure management, and that's key. And for all you on the phone, it's really all about making sure your management and up the command chain really understands that. Very, very key here. Also, I want to let you know, if you're familiar with the CVSS scoring, we do highlight and reply with that. So you do have that common vulnerability assessment scores. So that is part of the reporting as well. And you'll see the vulnerability. And again, here you'll see, in this case, what I would say, an OSS note. In this case, the valid ACL file, I'll give you a hint. Most likely the host file had a star in it, and it just needed to have some restrictions to it. That means any server had a access control list was in. Kind of comes out that way because we don't know what files you do, what servers you do and don't want access. I'll give you a hint there, a little correction action. But again, the key here is really being able to show and come back to that and saying, hey, how was that done? How do I fix it? My former life, actionable intelligence we're talking about here. Really, how do I go about fixing that? And that's what I talked to my friend, my CISO friend, the story I was telling you a little earlier. I said, look, let's look at all these, then let's fix them. And when you feel really good about it and when you have a good plan when you're patching, okay, then we can come in, and if you really want to do that pen test, I'll do that pen test for you. During the process, during our assessment, it's 2 to 3 weeks, more into duration. We set up, we come out, we talk a little bit. Nowadays, it's all virtual. Do a little bit of the planning. We do the execution and issue the report. And there's really 2 things that come out of this. Predominantly, I'd say 90+% is your remediation. You're going to be able to look at this report and go fix some things. Every once in a while, though, we do get a scenario where we're like, it looks like you might have an unwelcome house guest, and we've got to take a look at that. And really, at that point in time, you inform the agencies, your law enforcement, you work through it, you do your crime scene, and that kind of thing. But let me say, let's back up a little bit. 90+% is really remediation. Very rarely do we see, hey, we found something that somebody's still actively in there. Now, it doesn't mean people weren't in there and they're out, but that's the kind of a scenario there. Now, a little bit about kind of the process into protecting. So if you really look at it, it's a fixed price, low cost monetarily, and then the value received is so high cost on this. Really looking at that assessment. Again, it's not your assessment on who has SE16, who has profile generator, who has ME21 and can create a purchase order with no restrictions. It's not that kind of thing. It's really talking about that middle layer that is so critical. And again, we've got some customers doing this. We always recommend, this is a continuous process. You can't just do it one time. You've got to continually monitor, continually look for that. And obviously we are more than happy to help you with that process, either by performing it as an outsourcing or setting up a plan and a procedure for you to go about doing that. And again, the idea being is we start off with clear, identifiable risks, clear remediation, and actionable intelligence, something you can do right now to fix this problem. That's the key to the report. And that's the key to the delivery and the key to the vulnerability assessment.
Thank you, Bill, for taking us through that. And thanks, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Actually, that closes us off today from the content perspective. And we really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules, where we are in the year right now, and we appreciate you joining us today. Obviously, if you'd like to discuss any of the items or the solutions which we've highlighted today, please feel free to reach out directly. There's a lot of additional information on our website, but of course, we'd also welcome the opportunity to talk individually about any challenges you might be thinking that that exist right now, or any solutions that you're kind of looking at in a little bit more detail. So again, thanks for your time. Take care and have a good rest of the day. Thanks very much.